Chapter 9. Landing on Planet Earth. We have set foot only on the moon, and have probed only the planets closest to us with unmanned craft. Beyond our relatively close neighbors, both interplanetary and outer space are still outside the reach of even small scanning craft. But the Nephilim's own planet, with its vast orbit, has served as a traveling observatory, taking them through the orbits of all the outer planets and enabling them to observe at first hand most of the solar system. No wonder, then, that when they landed on Earth, a good deal of the knowledge they brought with them concerned astronomy and celestial mathematics. The Nephilim, quote, gods of heaven, end quote, upon Earth, taught man to look up into the heavens, just as Yahweh urged Abraham to do. No wonder, too, that even the earliest and crudest sculptures of drawings bore celestial symbols of constellations and planets, and that when the gods were to be represented or invoked, their celestial symbols were used as a graphic shorthand. By invoking the celestial, quote, divine, end quote, symbols, man was no longer alone. The symbols connected earthlings with the Nephilim, earth with heaven, mankind with the universe. Some of the symbols, we believe, also convey information that could be related only to space travel to Earth. Ancient sources provide a profusion of texts and lists dealing with the celestial bodies and their associations with the various deities. The ancient habit of assigning several epithet names to both the celestial bodies and the deities has made identification difficult. Even in the case of established identifications, such as Venus/Ishtar, the picture is confused by the changes in the pantheon. Thus, in earlier times, Venus was associated with Ninhursag. Somewhat greater clarity has been obtained by scholars, such as E.D. Van Buren, of Symbols of the Gods in Mesopotamian Art, who assembled and sorted out more than 80 symbols of gods and celestial bodies that can be found on cylinder seals, sculptures, stelae, reliefs, murals, and in great detail and clarity on boundary stones, Kuduru in Akkadian. When the classification of the symbols is made, it becomes evident that apart from stemming from some of the better-known southern or northern constellations, such as the sea serpent for the constellation Hydra, they represented either the 12 constellations of the zodiac, for example, the crab for Scorpio, or the 12 gods of heaven and earth, or the 12 members of the solar system. The Kuduru set up by Melishapak, king of Susa, shows the 12th symbol of the zodiac and the symbols of the 12 astral gods. A stela erected by the Assyrian king Esarhaddon shows the ruler holding the cup of life while facing the 12 chief gods of heaven and earth. We see 4 gods atop animals, in whom Ishtar on the lion and Adad holding the forked lightning can definitely be identified. 4 other gods are represented by the tools of their special attributes, as the war god Ninurta by his lion-headed mace. The remaining 4 gods are shown as celestial bodies: the sun, Shamash; the winged globe, the 12th planet, the abode of Anu; the moon's crescent; and a symbol consisting of 7 dots. Although in later times the god Sin was associated with the moon, identified by the crescent, ample evidence shows that in, quote, olden times, end quote, the crescent was a symbol of an earlier and bearded deity, one of Sumer's true, quote, olden gods, end quote. Often shown surrounded by streams of water, this god was undoubtedly Ea. The crescent was also associated with the science of measuring and calculating, of which Ea was the divine master. It was appropriate that the god of the seas and oceans, Ea, be assigned as his celestial counterpart, the moon, which causes the ocean's tides. What was the meaning of the symbol of the 7 dots? Many clues leave no doubt that it was a celestial symbol of Enlil. The depiction of the gateway of Anu, the winged globe, flanked by Ea and Enlil, represents them by the crescent and the 7-dot symbol. Some of the clearest depictions of the celestial symbols that were meticulously copied by Sir Henry Rawlinson of the cuneiform inscriptions of Western Asia assign the most prominent position to a group of 3 symbols, standing for Anu flanked by his 2 sons. These show that the symbol for Enlil could be either the 7 dots or a 7-pointed, quote, star, end quote. The essential element in Enlil's celestial representation was the number 7, The daughter Ninhursag was sometimes included, represented by the umbilical cutter. Scholars have been unable to understand a statement by Gudea, king of Lagash, that, quote, celestial 7 is 50, end quote. Attempts at arithmetic solutions, some formula whereby the number 7 would go into 50, failed to reveal the meaning of the statement. However, we see a simple answer. Gudea stated that the celestial body that is, quote, 7, end quote, stands for the god that is, quote, 50, end quote. The god Enlil, whose rank number was 50, had his celestial counterpart, the planet that was 7. Which planet was the planet of Enlil? We recall the texts that speak of the early times when the gods first came to Earth, when Anu stayed on the 12th planet, and his 2 sons who had gone down to Earth drew lots. Ea was given the, quote, rulership over the deep, end quote, and to Enlil, quote, the earth was given for his dominion, end quote. And the answer to the puzzle burst out in all its significance. The planet of Enlil was Earth. Earth, to the Nephilim, was the 7th planet. In February 1971, the United States launched an unmanned spacecraft on the longest mission to date. For 21 months it traveled, past Mars and the asteroid belt, to a precisely scheduled rendezvous with Jupiter. Then, as anticipated by NASA scientists, the immense gravitational pull of Jupiter, quote, grabbed, end quote, the spacecraft and hurled it into outer space. Speculating that Pioneer 10 might someday be attracted by the gravitational pull of another, quote, solar system, end quote, and crash land on some planet elsewhere in the universe, the Pioneer 10 scientists attached to it an engraved aluminum plaque bearing the accompanying, quote, message, end quote. The message employs a pictographic language, signs and symbols not too different from those used in the very first pictographic writing of Sumer. It attempts to tell whoever might find the plaque that mankind is male and female, of a size related to the size and shape of the spacecraft. It depicts the 2 basic chemical elements of our world and our location relative to a certain interstellar source of radio emissions. And it depicts our solar system as a sun and 9 planets, telling the finder, quote, the craft that you have found comes from the 3rd planet of this sun, end quote. Our astronomy is geared to the notion that Earth is the 3rd planet, which, indeed, it is if one begins to count from the center of our system, the sun. But to someone nearing our solar system from the outside, the first planet to be encountered would be Pluto, the 2nd Neptune, the 3rd Uranus, not Earth. 4th would be Saturn, 5th Jupiter, 6th Mars. And Earth would be 7th. No one but the Nephilim, traveling to Earth past Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars, could have considered Earth, quote, the 7th, end quote. Even if, for the sake of argument, one assumed that the inhabitants of ancient Mesopotamia, rather than travelers from space, had the knowledge or wisdom to count Earth's position not from the central sun, but from the solar system's edge, then it would follow that the ancient people knew of the existence of Pluto and Neptune and Uranus. Since they could not have known of these outermost planets on their own, the information must, we conclude, have been imparted to them by the Nephilim. Whichever assumption is adopted as a starting point, the conclusion is the same. Only the Nephilim could have known that there are planets beyond Saturn, as a consequence of which Earth, counting from the outside, is the 7th. Earth is not the only planet whose numerical position in the solar system was represented symbolically. Ample evidence shows that Venus was depicted as an 8-pointed star. Venus is the 8th planet, following Earth, when counted from the outside. The 8-pointed star also stood for the goddess Ishtar, whose planet was Venus. Many cylinder seals and other graphic relics depict Mars as the 6th planet. A cylinder seal shows the god associated with Mars, originally Nergal, then Nabu, seated on a throne under a 6-pointed, quote, star, end quote, as his symbol. Other symbols on the seal show the sun, much in the same manner we would depict it today, the moon, and the cross, symbol of the, quote, planet of crossing, end quote, the 12th planet. In Assyrian times, the, quote, celestial count, end quote, of a god's planet was often indicated by the appropriate number of star symbols placed alongside the god's throne. Thus, a plaque depicting the god Ninurta placed 4 star symbols at his throne. His planet Saturn is indeed the 4th planet, as counted by the Nephilim. Similar depictions have been found for most of the other planets. The central religious event of ancient Mesopotamia, the 12-day New Year festival, was replete with symbolism that had to do with the orbit of the 12th planet, the makeup of the solar system, and the journey of the Nephilim to Earth. The best documented of these, quote, affirmations of the faith, end quote, were the Babylonian New Year rituals. But evidence shows that the Babylonians only copied traditions going back to the beginning of Sumerian civilization. In Babylon, the festival followed a very strict and detailed ritual. Each portion, act, and prayer had a traditional reason and specific meaning. The ceremony started on the first day of Nisan, then the first month of the year, coinciding with the spring equinox. For 11 days, the other gods with a celestial status joined Marduk in a prescribed order. On the 12th day, each of the other gods departed to his own abode, and Marduk was left alone in his splendor. The parallel to the appearance of Marduk within the planetary system, his, quote, visit, end quote, with the 11 other members of the solar system, and the separation of the 12th day, leaving the 12th god to go on as king of the gods, but in isolation from them, is obvious. The ceremonies of the New Year festival paralleled the course of the 12th planet. The first 4 days, matching Marduk's passage by the first 4 planets, Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, and Saturn, were days of preparation. At the end of the 4th day, the rituals called for marking the appearance of the planet Iku, Jupiter, within sight of Marduk. The celestial Marduk was nearing the place of the celestial battle. Symbolically, the high priest began reciting the, quote, epic of creation, end quote, the tale of that celestial battle. The night passed without sleep. When the tale of the celestial battle had been recited, and as the 5th day was breaking, the rituals called for the 12-fold proclamation of Marduk as, quote, the Lord, end quote, affirming that in the aftermath of the celestial battle there were now 12 members of the solar system. The recitations then named the 12 members of the solar system and the 12 constellations of the zodiac. Sometime during the 5th day, the god Nabu, Marduk's son and heir, arrived by boat from his cult center, Borsippa, but he entered Babylon's temple compound only on the 6th day, for by then Nabu was a member of the Babylonian pantheon of 12, and the planet assigned to him was Mars, the 6th planet. The book of Genesis informs us that in 6 days, quote, the heaven and the earth and all their host, end quote, were completed. The Babylonian rituals commemorating the celestial events that resulted in the creation of the asteroid belt and Earth were also completed in the first 6 days of Nisan. On the 7th day, the festival turned its attention to Earth. Though details of the rituals on the 7th day are scarce, H. Frankfurt of Kingship and the Gods believes that they involved an enactment by the gods, led by Nabu, of the liberation of Marduk from his imprisonment in the, quote, mountains of lower earth, end quote. Since texts have been found that detail epic struggles between Marduk and other claimants to the rulership of Earth, we can surmise that the event of the 7th day were a reenactment of Marduk's struggle for supremacy on Earth, the, quote, 7th, end quote, his initial defeats, and his final victory and usurpation of the powers. On the 8th day of the New Year festival in Babylon, Marduk, victorious on Earth, as the forged Enuma Elish, had made him in the heavens, received the supreme powers. Having bestowed them on Marduk, the gods, assisted by the king and populace, then embarked, on the 9th day, on a ritual procession that took Marduk from his house within the city's sacred precinct to the, quote, house of Akitu, end quote, somewhere outside the city. Marduk and the visiting 11 gods stayed there through the 11th day. On the 12th day, the gods dispersed to their various abodes, and the festival was over. Of the many aspects of the Babylonian festival that reveal its earlier Sumerian origins, one of the most significant was that which pertained to the house of Akitu. Several studies, such as the Babylonian Akitu Festival by S.A. Paulus, have established that this house was featured in religious ceremonies in Sumer as early as the 3rd millennium BC. The essence of the ceremony was a holy procession that saw the reigning god leave his abode or temple and go, via several stations, to a place well out of town. A special ship, a, quote, divine boat, end quote, was used for the purpose. Then the god, successful in whatever his mission was at the Akiti house, returned to the city's quay by the same divine boat, and retraced his course back to the temple amid feasting and rejoicing by the king and populace. The Sumerian term, Akiti, from which the Babylonian Akitu derived, literally meant, quote, build on earth life, end quote. This, coupled with the various aspects of the mysterious journey, leads us to conclude that the procession symbolized the hazardous but successful voyage of the Nephilim from their abode to the 7th planet, Earth. Excavations conducted over some 20 years on the site of ancient Babylon, brilliantly correlated with Babylonian ritual texts, enabled teams of scholars led by F. Wetzel and F. H. Weisbach of Das Hauptheiligtum des Marduks in Babylon to reconstruct the holy precinct of Marduk, the architectural features of its ziggurat, and the processional way, portions of which were re-erected at the Museum of the Ancient Near East in East Berlin. The symbolic names of the 7 stations and the epithet of Marduk at each station were given in both Akkadian and Sumerian, attesting both to the antiquity and to the Sumerian origins of the procession and its symbolism. The first station of Marduk, at which his epithet was, quote, ruler of the heavens, end quote, is named, quote, house of holiness, end quote, in Akkadian, and, quote, house of bright waters, end quote, in Sumerian. The god's epithet at the second station is illegible. The station itself was named, quote, where the field separates, end quote. The partly mutilated name of the third station began with the words, quote, location facing the planet, end quote, and the god's epithet there changed to, quote, Lord of poured out fire, end quote. The fourth station was called, quote, holy place of destinies, end quote, and Marduk was called, quote, Lord of the storm of the waters of An and Ki, end quote. The fifth station appeared less turbulent. It was named, quote, the roadway, end quote, and Marduk assumed the title, quote, where the shepherd's word appears, end quote. Smoother sailing was also indicated at the sixth station, called, quote, the traveler's ship, end quote, where Marduk's epithet changed to, quote, God of the marked out gateway, end quote. The seventh station was the Bit Akitu, quote, house of building life on earth, end quote. There, Marduk took the title, quote, God of the house of resting, end quote. It is our contention that the 7 stations in the procession of Marduk represented the space trip of the Nephilim from their planet to Earth. That the first, quote, station, end quote, the, quote, house of bright waters, end quote, represented the passage by Pluto. The second, quote, where the field separates, end quote, was Neptune. The third, Uranus. The fourth, a place of celestial storms, Saturn. The fifth, where, quote, the roadway, end quote, became clear, quote, where the shepherd's word appears, end quote, was Jupiter. The sixth, where the journey switched to, quote, the traveler's ship, end quote, was Mars. And the seventh station was Earth, the end of the journey where Marduk provided the, quote, house of resting, end quote, the god's, quote, house of building life on Earth, end quote. How did the, quote, Aeronautics and Space Administration, end quote, of the Nephilim view the solar system in terms of the space flight to Earth? Logically, and in fact, they viewed the system in 2 parts. The one zone of concern was the zone of flight, which embraced the space occupied by the 7 planets extending from Pluto to Earth. The second group, beyond the zone of navigation, was made up of 4 celestial bodies: the Moon, Venus, Mercury, and the Sun. In astronomy and divine genealogy, the 2 groups were considered separate. Genealogically, Sin, as the Moon, was the head of the group of the, quote, 4, end quote. Shamash, as the Sun, was his son, and Ishtar, Venus, his daughter. Adad, as Mercury, was the uncle, Sin's brother, who always kept company with the nephew Shamash, and especially with his niece Ishtar. The, quote, seven, end quote, on the other hand, were lumped together in texts dealing with the affairs of both gods and men, and with celestial events. They were, quote, the seven who judge, end quote, quote, seven emissaries of Anu, their king, end quote. And it was after them that the number seven was consecrated. There were, quote, seven olden cities, end quote. Cities had 7 gates, gates had 7 bolts, blessings called for 7 years of plenty, curses for famines and plagues lasting 7 years, divine weddings were celebrated by, quote, 7 days of lovemaking, end quote, and so on and on. During solemn ceremonies like those that accompanied the rare visits to Earth by Anu and his consort, the deities representing the 7 planets were assigned certain positions and ceremonial robes, while the 4 were treated as a separate group. For example, ancient rules of protocol stated, quote, the deities Adad, Sin, Shamash, and Ishtar shall be seated in the court until daybreak, end quote. In the skies, each group was supposed to stay in its own celestial zone, and the Sumerians assumed that there was a, quote, celestial bar, end quote, keeping the 2 groups apart. Quote, an important astral mythological text, end quote, according to A. Jeremias of the Old Testament and the Light of the Ancient Near East, deals with some remarkable celestial event when the 7, quote, stormed in upon the celestial bar, end quote. In this upheaval, which apparently was an unusual alignment of the 7 planets, quote, they made allies of the hero Shamash, the sun, and of the valiant Adad, Mercury, end quote. Meaning, perhaps, that all exerted a gravitational pull in a single direction. Quote, at the same time, Ishtar, seeking a glorious dwelling place with Anu, strove to become queen of heaven, end quote. Venus was somehow shifting its location to a more, quote, glorious dwelling place, end quote. The greatest effect was on Sin, the moon. Quote, the 7 who fear not the laws, the light-giver Sin had violently besieged, end quote. The appearance of the 12th planet saved the darkened moon and made it, quote, shine forth in the heavens, end quote, once again. The 4 were located in a celestial zone the Sumerians termed Gerhia, quote, celestial waters where rockets are confused, end quote. Muhi, quote, confusion of spacecraft, end quote. Or Ulhi, quote, band of confusion, end quote. These puzzling terms make sense once we realize that the Nephilim considered the heavens of the solar system in terms of their space travel. Only recently, the engineers of ComSat, Communications Satellite Corporation, discovered that the sun and moon, quote, trick, end quote, satellites and, quote, shut them off, end quote. Earth satellites could be, quote, confused, end quote, by showers of particles from solar flares or by the changes in the moon's reflection of infrared rays. The Nephilim, too, were aware that rocket ships or spacecraft entered a, quote, zone of confusion, end quote, once they passed Earth and neared Venus, Mercury, and the Sun. Separated from the 4 by an assumed celestial bar, the 7 were in a celestial zone for which the Sumerians used the term Ub. The Ub consisted of 7 parts called an Akkadian, Giparu, quote, night residence, end quote. There is little doubt that this was the origin of Near Eastern beliefs in the, quote, 7 heavens, end quote. The 7, quote, orbs, end quote, or, quote, spheres, end quote, of the Ub comprised of Akkadian Kishatu, quote, the entirety, end quote. The term's origin was the Sumerian Shu, which also implied, quote, that part which was the most important, end quote, the supreme. The 7 planets were therefore sometimes called, quote, the 7 shiny ones, Shunin, end quote. The 7 who, quote, and the supreme part rest, end quote. The 7 were treated in greater technical detail than the 4. Sumerian, Babylonian, and Assyrian celestial lists described them with various epithets and listed them in their correct order. Most scholars, assuming that the ancient texts could not possibly have dealt with planets beyond Saturn, have found it difficult to identify correctly the planets described in the text. but our own findings make identification and understanding of the name's meanings relatively easy. First to be encountered by the Nephilim approaching a solar system was Pluto. The Mesopotamian lists named this planet Shupa, quote, supervisor of the Shu, end quote, the planet that guards the approach of the supreme part of the solar system. As we shall see, the Nephilim could land on Earth only if their spaceship were launched from the 12th planet well before reaching Earth's vicinity. They could thus have crossed the orbit of Pluto not only as inhabitants of the 12th planet, but also as astronauts in a moving spaceship. An astronomical text said that the planet Shupa was the one, quote, the deity and will fix the destiny for the land, end quote, where the god, in charge of the spacecraft, set the right course for the planet Earth and the land of Sumer. Next to Shupa was Iru, quote, loop, end quote. At Neptune, the spacecraft of the Nephilim probably commenced its wide curve, or, quote, loop, end quote, toward its final target. Another list named the planet Humba, which connotes, quote, swampland vegetation, end quote. When we probe Neptune someday, will we discover its persistent association with water is due to the watery swamps the Nephilim saw upon it? Uranus was called Kakab Shanama, quote, planet which is the double, end quote. Uranus is truly the twin of Neptune in size and appearance. A Sumerian list calls it Intimashig, quote, planet of bright greenish life, end quote. Is Uranus, too, a planet on which swampy vegetation abounded? Beyond Uranus looms Saturn, a giant planet, nearly 10 times Earth size, distinguished by its rings, which extend more than twice as far out as the planet's diameter. Armed with a tremendous gravitational pull in the mysterious rings, Saturn must have posed many dangers to the Nephilim and their spacecraft. This may well explain why they called the fourth planet Targalu, quote, the Great Destroyer, end quote. The planet was also called Kaksidi, quote, weapon of righteousness, end quote, and Simutu, quote, he who for justice kills, end quote. Throughout the ancient Near East, the planet represented the punisher of the unjust. Were these names expressions of fear or references to actual space accidents? The Akitu rituals we have seen made references to, quote, storms of the waters, end quote, between An and Ki in the fourth day, when the spacecraft was between Anshar, Saturn, and Kishar, Jupiter. A very early Sumerian text, assumed since its first publication in 1912 to be, quote, an ancient magical text, end quote, very possibly records the loss of a spaceship and its 50 occupants. It relates how Marduk, arriving at Eridu, rushed to his father Ea with some terrible news. Quote, it has been created like a weapon. It has charged forward like death. The Anunnaki, who are 50, it has smitten. The flying, bird-like Shusar, it has smitten on the breast, end quote. The text does not identify, quote, it, end quote, whatever destroyed the Shusar, the flying, quote, supreme chaser, end quote, and its 50 astronauts. But fear of celestial danger was evident only in regard to Saturn. The Nephilim must have passed by Saturn and come in view of Jupiter with a great sense of relief. They called the fifth planet Barbaru, quote, bright one, end quote, as well as Sagmigar, quote, great one, where the spacesuits are fastened, end quote. Another name for Jupiter, Sibzi Ana, quote, true guide in the heavens, end quote, also described its probable role in the journey to Earth. It was a signal for curving into the difficult passage between Jupiter and Mars, and the entry into the dangerous zone of the asteroid belt. From the epithets, it would seem that it was at this point that the Nephilim put on their Mies, their spacesuits. Mars, appropriately, was called Utu Ka Gaba, quote, light established at the gate of the waters, end quote, reminding us of the Sumerian and biblical descriptions of the asteroid belt as the celestial, quote, bracelet, end quote, separating the, quote, upper waters, end quote, from the, quote, lower waters, end quote, of the solar system. More precisely, Mars was referred to as Shalibu, quote, one near the center, end quote, of the solar system, An unusual drawing on a cylinder seal suggests that, passing Mars, an incoming spacecraft of the Nephilim established constant communication with, quote, mission control, end quote, on Earth. The central object in this ancient drawing simulates a symbol of the 12th planet, the winged globe. Yet it looks different. It is more mechanical, more manufactured than natural. Its, quote, wings, end quote, look almost exactly like the solar panels with which American spacecraft are provided to convert the sun's energy to electricity. The two antennas cannot be mistaken. The circular craft, with its crown-like top and extended wings and antennas, is located in the heavens, between Mars, the six-pointed star, and Earth and its moon. On Earth, a deity extends his hand in greeting to an astronaut still out in the heavens, near Mars. The astronaut is shown wearing a helmet with a visor and a breastplate. The lower part of his suit is like that of a, quote, fishman, end quote, a requirement, perhaps, in case of an emergency splashdown in the ocean. In one hand he holds an instrument, the other hand reciprocates the greeting from Earth. And then, cruising on, there was Earth, the seventh planet. In the list of the, quote, seven celestial gods, it was called Shuji, quote, right resting place of Shu, end quote. It also meant, quote, land at the conclusion of Shu, end quote, of the supreme part of the solar system, the destination of the long space journey. While in the ancient Near East, the sound G was sometimes transformed into the more familiar Ki, quote, earth, end quote, quote, dry land, end quote, the pronunciation and syllable G have endured into our own times into the original meaning, exactly as the Nephilim meant it to be: geography, geometry, geology. In the earliest form of pictographic writing, the sign Shuji also meant Shibu, quote, the seventh, end quote, and the astronomical text explained. Sharshadi il Enlil, Ana Kakab Shuji Ikabi, quote, Lord of the Mountains, deity Enlil, with planet Shuji is identical, end quote. Paralleling the seven stations of Marduk's journey, the planet's name also bespeak a spaceflight. The land at the journey's end was the seventh planet, Earth. We may never know whether, countless years from now, someone on another planet will find and understand the message drawn on the plaque attached to the Pioneer 10. Likewise, one would think it futile to expect to find on Earth such a plaque in reverse, a plaque conveying to Earthlings information regarding the location and the route from the 12th planet. Yet such extraordinary evidence does exist. The evidence is a clay tablet found in the ruins of the Royal Library in Nineveh. Like many of the other tablets, it is undoubtedly an Assyrian copy of an earlier Sumerian tablet. Unlike others, it is a circular disc, and though some cuneiform signs on it are excellently preserved, the few scholars who took on the task of deciphering the tablet ended by calling it, quote, the most puzzling Mesopotamian document, end quote. In 1912, L.W. King, then curator of the Assyrian and Babylonian antiquities in the British Museum, made a meticulous copy of the disc, which is divided into 8 segments. The undamaged portions bear geometric shapes unseen on any other ancient artifacts, designed and drawn with considerable precision. They include arrows, triangles, intersecting lines, and even an ellipse, a geometric mathematical curve previously assumed to have been unknown in ancient times. The unusual and puzzling clay plaque was first brought to the attention of the scientific community in a report submitted to the British Royal Astronomical Society on January 9, 1880. R.H.M. Bosanquet and A.H. Sase, and one of the earliest discourses on, quote, the Babylonian astronomy, end quote, referred to it as a planisphere, or the reproduction of a spherical surface as a flat map. They announced that some of the cuneiform signs on it, quote, suggest measurements, appear to bear some technical meaning, end quote. The many names of celestial bodies appearing in the 8 segments of the plaque clearly established its astronomical character. Bosanquet and Sase were especially intrigued by the 7, quote, dots, end quote, in one segment. They said these might represent the phases of the moon, were it not for the fact that the dots appeared to run along a line naming the, quote, stars of stars, end quote, Dilgan, and a celestial body called Apen. Quote, there can be no doubt that this enigmatic figure is susceptible of a simple explanation, end quote, they said. But their own effort to provide such an explanation did not go beyond reading correctly the phonetic values of the cuneiform signs and the conclusion that the disk was a celestial planisphere. When the Royal Astronomical Society published a sketch of the planisphere, J. Oppert and P. Jensen improved the reading of some star or planet names. Dr. Fritz Hammel, writing in a German magazine in 1891, quote, Die Astronomie der Alten Calder, end quote, drew attention to the fact that each one of the 8 segments of the planisphere formed an angle of 45 degrees, from which he concluded that a total sweep of the skies, all 360 degrees of the heavens, was represented. He suggested that the focal point marks some location, quote, in the Babylonian skies, end quote. There the matter rested until Ernst F. Widener, first in an article published in 1912, Babylonica, quote, zur babylonischen Astronomie, end quote, and then in his major textbook, Handbuch der babylonischen Astronomie, in 1915, thoroughly analyzed the tablet, only to conclude that it did not make sense. His bafflement was caused by the fact that while the geometric shapes and the names of the stars or planets written within the various segments were legible or intelligible, even if their meaning or purpose was unclear, the inscriptions along the lines, running at 45-degree angles of each other, just did not make sense. They were, invariably, a series of repeated syllables in the tablet's Assyrian language. They ran, for example, thus: Luberdi, 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 Bat, 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 Kash, 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 Alu, 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 Alu. Weiner concluded that the plaque was both astronomical and astrological, used as a magical tablet for exorcism, like several other texts consisting of repeated syllables. With this, he laid to rest any further interest in the unique tablet. But the tablet's inscriptions assume a completely different aspect if we try to read them not as Assyrian word signs, but as Sumerian word syllables. For there can hardly be any doubt that the tablet represents an Assyrian copy of an earlier Sumerian original. When we look at one of the segments, which we can number 1, its meaningless syllables, na 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 na, ana, ananu, along the descending line, sha sha sha, sha sha sha, along the circumference, sham sham, bur bur kur, along the horizontal line. Literally spring to meaningfulness if we enter the Sumerian meaning of these word syllables. What unfolds here is a route map, making the way by which the god Enlil, quote, went by the planets, end quote, accompanied by some operating instructions. The line inclined at 45 degrees appears to indicate the line of a spaceship's descent from a point which is, quote, high, 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 end quote, through, quote, vapor clouds, end quote, and a lower zone that is vaporless, toward the horizon point where the skies and the ground meet. In the skies near the horizontal line, the instructions to the astronauts make sense. They are told to, quote, set, 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 end quote, their instruments for the final approach. Then, as they near the ground, quote, rockets, rockets, end quote, are fired to slow the craft, which apparently should be raised, quote, piled up, end quote, before reaching the landing point because it has to pass over high or rugged terrain, quote, mountain, mountain, end quote. The information provided in this segment clearly pertains to a space voyage by Enlil himself. In this first segment, we are given a precise geometric sketch of 2 triangles connected by a line that turns at an angle. The line represents a route, for the inscription clearly states that the sketch shows how the, quote, deity Enlil went up by the planets, end quote. The starting point is the triangle on the left, representing the farther reaches of the solar system. The target area is on the right, where all segments converge toward the landing point. The triangle on the left drawn with its base open, is akin to a known sign in the Near Eastern pictographic writing. Its meaning can be read as, quote, the ruler's domain, the mountainous land, end quote. The triangle on the right is identified by the inscription Chpt Il and Lil, quote, way of God and Lil, end quote. The term, as we know, denotes Earth's northern skies. The angled line, then, connects what we believe to have been the 12th planet, quote, the ruler's domain, the mountainous land, end quote, with Earth's skies. The route passes between two celestial bodies, Dilgan and Apen. Some scholars have maintained that these were names of distant stars or parts of constellations. If modern manned and unmanned spacecraft navigate by obtaining a, quote, fix, end quote, on predetermined bright stars, a similar navigational technique for the Nephilim cannot be ruled out. Yet the notion that the two names stand for such faraway stars somehow does not agree with the meaning of their names. Dilgan meant literally, quote, the first station, end quote, and Apen, quote, where the right course is set, end quote. The meanings of the names indicate way stations, points passed by. We tend to agree with such authorities as Thomson, Epping, and Strassmayer, who identified Apen as the planet Mars. If so, the meaning of this sketch becomes clear. The route between the planet of kingship and the skies above Earth pass between Jupiter, quote, the first station, end quote, and Mars, quote, where the right course is set, end quote. This terminology, by which the descriptive names of the planets were related to their role in the space voyage of the Nephilim, conforms with the names of the epithets in the list of the 7 Shu planets. As if to confirm our conclusions, the inscription stating that this was the route of Enlil appears below a row of 7 dots, the 7 planets that stretch from Pluto to Earth. Not surprisingly, the remaining 4 celestial bodies, those in the, quote, zone of confusion, end quote, are shown separately, beyond Earth's northern skies in the celestial band. Evidence that this is a space map and flight manual shows up in all other undamaged segments too. Continuing in a counterclockwise direction, the legible portion of the next segment bears the inscription, quote, take, 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 cast, 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 complete, complete, end quote. The third segment, where a portion of the unusual elliptical shape is seen, the legible inscriptions include, quote, Kakab, Sibzi Ana, envoy of Ana, deity Ishtar, end quote. And the intriguing sentence, quote, deity Nini, supervisor of descent, end quote. In the fourth segment, which contains to appear to be directions on how to establish one's destination according to a certain group of stars, the descending line is specifically identified as the skyline. The word sky is repeated 11 times under the line. Does this segment represent a flight phase nearer Earth, nearer the landing spot? This might indeed be the import of the legend over the horizontal line. Quote, hills, 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 top, 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 city, 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 end quote. The inscription in the center says, quote, Kakab Mashtaba, or Gemini, whose encounter is fixed. Kakab Zibziana, or Jupiter, provides knowledge, end quote. If, as appears to be the case, the segments are arranged in an approach sequence, then one can almost share the excitement of the Nephilim as they approach Earth's spaceport. The next segment, again identifying the descending line as, quote, sky, 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 end quote, also announces, our light, our light, our light, change, 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 observe path and high ground, flat land. The horizontal line contains, for the first time, figures. Rocket, 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 rise, glide, 40, 40, 40, 40, 40, 20, 22, 22. The upper line of the next segment no longer states, quote, sky, sky, end quote. Instead,
it calls for, quote, channel, 100, 100, 100, 100, 100, 100, 100, end quote. A pattern is discernible in this largely damaged segment. Along one of the lines, inscription says, quote, Asher, end quote, which can mean, quote, he who sees, end quote, or, quote, seeing, end quote. The seventh segment is too damaged to add to our examination. The few discernible syllables mean, quote, distant, distant, sight, sight, end quote. And the instructional words are, quote, press down, end quote. The eighth and final segment, however, is almost complete. Directional lines, arrows, and inscriptions mark a path between two planets. Instructions to, quote, pile up, mountain, mountain, end quote, show 4 sets of crosses inscribed twice, quote, fuel, water, grain, end quote, and twice, quote, vapor, water, grain, end quote. Was this a segment dealing with preparations for the flight toward Earth, or one dealing with stocking up for the return flight to rejoin the 12th planet? The latter may have been the case, for the line with the sharp arrow pointing toward the landing site on Earth has at its other end another, quote, arrow, end quote, pointing in the opposite direction, and bearing the legend, quote, return, end quote. When Ea arranged for Ansu's emissary to, quote, make Adapa take the road to heaven, end quote, and Anu discovered the ruse, he demanded to know, why did Ea, to a worthless human, the plan of heaven-earth disclose, rendering him distinguished, making a Shem for him? In the planisphere we have just deciphered, we indeed see such a route map, a, quote, plan of heaven-earth, end quote. In sign language and in words, the Nephilim have sketched for us the route for their planet to ours. Otherwise inexplicable texts dealing with celestial distances also make sense if we read them in terms of space travel from the 12th planet. One such text, found in the ruins of Nippur and believed to be some 4,000 years old, is now kept at the Helprecht collection at the University of Jena in Germany. O. Neugebauer, of the Exact Sciences of Antiquity, established that the tablet was undoubtedly a copy, quote, from an original composition which was older, end quote. It gives ratios of celestial distances starting from the moon to Earth and then through space to 6 other planets. The second part of the text appears to have provided the mathematical formulas for solving whatever the interplanetary problem was, stating, according to some readings, 44, 26, 40 times 9 is 640. 13 Kaspu, 10 Ushmol, Shupa, Eli Mol Gir Sud, 44, 26, 40 times 7 is 5, 11, 6, 40. 10 Kaspu, 11 Ush, 6.5 Gar, 2 Ulmol Gir Tab, Eli Mol Shupa Sud. There has never been full agreement among scholars as to the correct reading of the measurement units in this part of the text. A new reading was suggested to us in a letter from Dr. J. Olsner, custodian of the Hilprecht collection at Jena. It is clear, however, that the second part of the text measured distances from Shupa, Pluto. Only the Nephilim, traversing the planetary orbits, could have worked out these formulas. Only they needed such data. Taking into consideration that their own planet and their target, Earth, were both in continuous motion, the Nephilim had to aim their craft not at where Earth was at launch time, but where it would be at arrival time. One can safely assume that the Nephilim worked out their trajectories very much as modern scientists mapped emissions to the moon and to other planets. The spacecraft of the Nephilim was probably launched from the 12th planet in the direction of the 12th planet's own orbit, but well ahead of its arrival in Earth's vicinity. Based on these and a myriad other factors, 2 alternative trajectories for the spacecraft were worked out for us by Amnon Sitchin, Doctor of Aeronautics and Engineering. The first trajectory would call for the launching of the spacecraft from the 12th planet before it reached its apogee, the point farthest out. With few power needs, the spaceship would actually not so much change course as slow down. While the 12th planet, a space vehicle too, even though a huge one, continued on its vast elliptical orbit, the spaceship would follow a much shorter elliptical course and reach Earth far ahead of the 12th planet. This alternative may have offered the Nephilim both advantages and disadvantages. The full span of 3,600 Earth years, which applied to 10 years of office and other activities of the Nephilim upon Earth, suggests that they might have preferred the second alternative, that of a short trip and a stay in Earth's skies coinciding with the arrival of the 12th planet itself. This would have called for the launching of the spaceship, C, when the 12th planet was about midway on its course back to the apogee. With the planet's own speed rapidly increasing, the spaceship required strong engines to overtake its home planet and reach Earth, V, a few Earth years ahead of the 12th planet. Based on complex technical data, as well as hints in Mesopotamian text, it appears that the Nephilim adopted for their Earth missions the same approach NASA adopted for the Moon missions. When the principal spaceship neared the target planet, Earth, it went into orbit around the planet without actually landing. Instead, a smaller craft was released from the mothership and performed the actual landing. As difficult as accurate landings were, the departures from Earth must have been even trickier. The landing craft had to rejoin its mothership, which then had to fire up its engines and accelerate to extremely high speeds, where it had to catch up with the 12th planet, which by then was passing its perigee between Mars and Jupiter at its top orbital speed. Dr. Sitchin has calculated that there were 3 points in the spaceship's orbit of Earth that lent themselves to a thrust toward the 12th planet. The 3 alternatives offer the Nephilim a choice of catching up with the 12th planet within 1.1 to 1.6 Earth years. Suitable terrain, guidance from Earth, and perfect coordination with the home planet were required for successful arrivals, landings, takeoffs, and departures from Earth. As we shall see, the Nephilim met all these requirements. End of Chapter 9. Thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe for more. Also, please comment sequel below if you want to hear Book 2 of the Earth Chronicles series, The Stairway to Heaven.